Very good. I'll take this. One more thing. I'm going to take a little time from Ron here. Today is Ron's birthday. So in honor of his birthday, I won't have us all sing happy birthday. I brought something for Ron. And Ron, I would just like to say, is it okay? Can I leave the bottle?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Well, you know, as a producer, I don't get up here very often. I'm the guy behind, like so many people are in the business. And first of all, I really want to thank Tom for the wonderful speech. It was great things he said about me, and he repeated them exactly as I wrote it for him. So I really appreciate that. I've been in the business longer than 35 years, and a lot of changes have happened. I started off editing on 2-inch quad tape. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But, these great big hissing machines run on compressed air, spin physics heads that they would change all the time. And Mark Sharon, I don't know if you people know him, but he and I were putting together a show. And the only way you could edit is you could put a tone on the record machine, set the counter, wind it back 5 seconds, set the playback machine at 0 it, wind it back 5 seconds. Then Mark would stand between the two, push the play button with one hand, and use a broomstick to press the other one. So you go like this. And if you got a half second, with an accuracy, you're doing well. Wow. Also remember shooting on single system sound. We did whole documentaries that way. It was, I was a little nervous because you were cutting original. I used to get so nervous doing this one documentary we did on artists in San Diego that I would wear my running clothes while I was editing on the flatbed. And if I got too tense, I would go out and jog around the campus for a little bit, because it was just like if you made a mistake, you were finished. I think it would help if I put my glasses on, actually. I got a pair. This would help me actually read my script. Something I want to acknowledge was the KPBS auctions. That was something that Ken was very much involved with. Everybody in public broadcasting was involved in. And I literally gave my blood to the station at that point. Don Johnson and I were in the scene shop doing some work, and I reached over a table saw and just touched the blade with my thumb, which I didn't think was much until he called the police. The police took me to one hospital. They said, we're not going to touch it. By the time you get to the third medical facility, they go, you're starting to think maybe there's something wrong. So that ended up all right, and I still made my producer's shift the next day at the auction. Another interesting story Don and I have is that in the old days at PBS, we used to direct out of a truck outside the studio because we didn't have a facility inside. And we're doing pledge, and show comes to the end. It was probably Ken sitting there just talking. We'd give him a cue and say, you've got 8 minutes, And he was unflappable. So we opened the door, and there at the base of the step is a skunk and like 3 babies. So we just kind of closed the door, call up inside and say, hold the hearts game, which was what we did between breaks, and we'll be out as soon as they leave. The story about Tom and I working on the Acid Rain video, or actually that was a film in those days, it was really, we spent a lot of time just sleeping on planes. We were really, really busy. Towards the end, we're out in the Finger Lakes, and we're paddling around on a canoe, and I'm getting nice sounds of the water, and I drop a Sennheiser into the lake. Fortunately, it was at the end, and I'm absolutely convinced that I'm dead because I know how much a Sennheiser shotgun costs. So we come back from the shoot, I give it over to the engineers, and they let me twist slowly in the wind for about 5 days until they told me that after it dried out, it still worked fine. I'd like to sort of say how wonderful it is that you get to meet great people in this business, and I'd like to sort of just say some of them, drop a few names. I've shaken hands with Jonas Salk, which was pretty interesting. We had Warren Buffett in the studio, who surprised me by not showing up with an entourage. Here it is, the richest man in the world, and he shows up with his daughter driving the car. Just walks in as friendly Midwesterner as ever. Mr. Rogers, who I had the pleasure of hanging out with for a while, just the same in life as he was, on television, just a wonderful man. And Bill Moyers, who I met one time at a convention and was able to remember my name days later and sort of acknowledge me in front of a bunch of people going, "Hi, Ron, how you doing?" And I was just like, I couldn't believe he would actually do that. I'd like to acknowledge Paul Marshall, who did a series called Club Date, allowed me to hear some of the great jazz people. And he always liked me because one of the fun things I get to do sometimes is run camera. I always enjoy that. I don't get to do it very often, and nowadays I don't even go out anymore because they're getting much more complicated for me. And Paul always liked me because I have a musical background, so I knew what a 4-bar break was, so he was always appreciative of that. Well, I'd like to thank some people who made it all happen. Tom, of course, who brought me back after a 7-year hiatus where I worked for Sega and did a lot of things, and it was great to come back to San Diego because, as everybody who lives here knows, it's like the land of the lotus blossoms. Once you're in San Diego, why would you want to live anyplace else? I'd like to thank Gloria Penner, who, was my boss for a long time, was a great editor on my copy, and a pretty hard taskmaster. During one of the pledge drives, I worked 160 hours of overtime in March. That's overtime. And Gloria, being the kind person, she said, "Well, take 3 days off in a row." So that was the early days. Pat Finn, who is a great wordsmith and would edit my copy and be pretty brutal on it, but she was good because if I could defend a phrase, she'd back down, so I always appreciated that. I'd like to thank the people at San Diego State who I studied with. Bob McKee, who one time said the people on the studio were having too much of a cavalier attitude. Hayes Anderson, my advisor, actually told me I would graduate, and which was iffy. You do all those independent studies and you wonder if they'll buy it, that it's still a work print. I'd like to thank my mom and dad. My parents were very supportive throughout my whole life. We always had a dark room in our house, and my dad would encourage you to go down there and fiddle around and see what you could make. And when I said I was going to study television, he thought it was a good idea. And I'd like, of course, to thank my wonderful wife, Mary, who has put up with me for, 17, 18 years now. And it's just a joy to my heart, and always pleasant to come home after late nights, and and allows me to yell at the television station. I'll be sitting there watching TV, and she'll go, "They can't hear you," and I'm critiquing and saying, "How come you cut like that?" Things like that. And finally, I'd like to thank Natus and all the people in the Silver Circle who decided to let me join such a wonderful thing. You've made me sort of reevaluate a tenet I have. I always say to myself, you have to enjoy the little things because the big things come along. They're usually a little disappointing, and they don't really add up to that much. Well, this is a big thing. It took a long time to come along, and it's really given me something wonderful, and it certainly wasn't disappointing. Thank you all.